In episode 9, Lucas was able to decipher some more of the message. On top of the whole "this game is rigged" thing, it also says, we think we're the chosen ones, but in fact, we're one of many. The founders didn't just build a single silo, they built 50, which Lucas finds out later is actually 51. And the founders created something called the Safeguard. Then Lucas finally gets the breakthrough that he needs. In Quinn's letter, it says, if you don't believe me, go to the very bottom of the silo. Find the tunnel, you'll get confirmation there. So Lucas goes to update Bernard, but he can't find him. The only person he finds is Almundson, who says, I'm not supposed to disturb Bernard until later tonight. Bernard, though, is busy in IT keeping tabs on Walker. He knows that eventually he'll find out what the Resistance is up to, and he does. Ever since Teddy and his crew got caught, they need another supply. The problem is they don't know who's on their side. Luckily, though, they are getting an ally slowly. It's the Billings family. Both Paul and Kathleen are slowly becoming believers. Kathleen not understanding why they can't own books with pictures like the one that Paul gave her. Paul not understanding it either. And the more that Kathleen talks to Patrick Kennedy, the more she thinks that there is something that they're not telling them. Especially when Patrick brings up, what if that's not our past? What if that picture is our present? What if it currently looks like that outside and we're just being lied to? Now, yeah, Paul's getting a little bit of pressure from Kathleen, but he's also getting a lot of pressure from Knox, Shirley, and the group to come to their side and help them out. After all, they need somebody from the up top to help them. And Paul does have connections, but he tells them, I don't know if anybody in the sheriff's office would help us out at all. And that's when Knox thinks about the one person who showed him kindness when they were trying to get to the bottom, and that's Camille Sims. So it looks like they do at least have some sort of in, and it's with the judge's wife. After this meeting in the cafeteria, Knox goes to Walker's workshop, where he tells her, we got great news, we have the sheriff now. We're planning on taking the silo, and when we do, the first person we're going to get is Carla. So we have a plan now. What Knox doesn't know, though, is that this entire conversation is being watched by Bernard, and once Knox leaves, Bernard sends Walker an email. He wants to know what their plan is, even though he heard the entire conversation, and Carla yells into the camera, how am I supposed to know? You've got me shackled in here. After the meeting with Walker, though, Knox heads to the prison down deep in Hank's office. You've got Hank, Paul, and Knox waiting word to find out if Billings' message to the top got through. He was able to ask a raider who was a friend to deliver a message to Sims. Not Camille Sims, but Rob. And the way he did that was dangling a relic. And not too long after Knox arrives, they get word that there is somebody at the barricade who wants to speak to Billings. And it is, in fact, Sims. Sims kind of tries to play tough about the whole situation, insulting Billings on the fact that he clearly has switched sides. But Billings reminds Rob that it was Camille who helped two people escape back to the down deep. And that once Sims sees exactly what he's going to hand him, he'll understand that Paul had no choice but to cross the line, or as Paul puts it, the line moved. He then hands Sims the picture, the same picture he showed his wife, and he walks down, hoping that that picture created an ally. While Billings was talking to Sims, Knox was able to figure out who the rat was. He goes to Walker to let her know, after all, she is an important figure in the down deep, but Knox has no clue that they're being watched. So when he says aloud, I figured out who ratted us out, both Walker and Bernard, who's watching from IT, get a little nervous, but then Knox says it was Teddy's mom. Knox had seen her right at the barricade before the raid on Supply, and he figures that Teddy's mom ratted them all out so that nothing would actually happen to Teddy. While it's unfortunate, Knox also says to Walker, we can't punish her. I mean, not for trying to protect her son. He then switches up the conversation and says, what we're doing isn't working. We need a new idea. And he has an idea, and it involves the gunpowder that they took from Supply. He's planning on using it. Bernard had seen this entire conversation because he was locked in a room, but not too far away. Sims and Camille sit in their apartment and they look at what Billings handed them. At first, they just wonder if it's real, and they don't know. But then Camille says, we need to pick a side. They might win if you do what Billings asked. And if they do win, they'll need somebody to run the silo, and that could be you. Rob is a little hesitant to do it because he still thinks that he's seen as the enemy by the Down Deepers. So Camille says, fine, I'll do what Billings wants. And while Camille works on that, which is likely getting all the sheriff's department on their side, Rob has an idea of how he can help. He mentions the key that Bernard always has on him with the number 18 on it and how it lights up when things go sideways. He knows that when things go haywire, Bernard uses the key to get into the server room. But as to what's in the server room, he has no idea because he's never been in it. What he does find interesting, though, is the last time he saw Bernard go in there, when Bernard came out, he said, "I have to become mayor." And the only people that have access to the server room is the head of IT or whoever has that key. So Rob is planning on getting that key. That's what Bernard's former second-in-command was up to. As for his current second-in-command, Lucas, after failing to find Bernard, he headed to visit his mom's. He knew that he needed to follow the Quinn letter to get to the bottom of the silo, but in order to do that, he had to go into enemy territory, which was the Down Deep. He didn't want to just leave Quinn's copy of the pact sitting in his apartment or bringing it with him and risking having it taken. He needed to put it in a safe space, so he took it to his mom's. And his mom, who had no idea that he was back, the last time she heard of him, he was sentenced for 5 years into the mines, is very surprised. She wants to make small talk, but he doesn't have time to talk. And they go a little bit back and forth, and finally he just says, "Look, I was a coward before, and I'm not about to be a coward again. I need you to hide this." And when she finally agrees, he takes off for the bottom. He is able to talk his way past the barricade. They do warn him it's dangerous, and sure enough, when he gets through the barricade, he is apprehended right away by people from the Down Deep who do not trust him. He drops the name Juliet Nichols just to keep from being thrown over the side of it, and then he's locked up, as Shirley comes up to examine what exactly is going on with this so-called guy from IT who's flashing a blue badge to everybody. When Lucas first tries to explain to Shirley who he is, Shirley just walks away. But then he gets her to stop right in his tracks by saying, "I think I know what happened to Juliet. And I'll tell you if you help me get to where I need to go." Shirley escorts Lucas right to the bottom of the silo, right where the drill is. And she doesn't believe there's a tunnel down there. She's never seen it. But Lucas points out there's got to be something down there. I mean, there's pumps down there. If not, this whole thing would have been filled with water. So Shirley, who is just as interested in this whole tunnel situation as Lucas to this point, sets up a pulley system to help him get down there. Right before she lowers him, though, she does say, "What happened to Juliet?" And Lucas says, "The last time we heard from her, she was alive. Her helmet went out, but she was alive. So there is a chance that she still is alive. There's hope." As for any more details, he just doesn't have it. But for Shirley, the hope, that's enough for her. As for Lucas, he does get slowly dropped down. He makes his way to the bottom of the water, and yeah, it's probably waist high. And when he looks around, he is able to locate the tunnel that Quinn was talking about. When he walks deep in the tunnel, though, that's when lights pop up. And that voice that he heard from the relic room, that sort of quasi-museum that alerted Bernard to the event that was happening when Mechanical shot the rocket up, that voice echoes again. It says, "Lucas Kyle, why are you here?" And Lucas says, "Salvador Quinn sent me." The voice explains that before Lucas, only 3 people had made it this far. It was Salvador Quinn, it was Meadows, and it was George. The only 2 people he talked to, though, were Meadows and Salvador Quinn. It then says, "If you speak to anybody about what you see down here, we will have no choice but to initiate the safeguard. Do you know what the safeguard is?" And Lucas says yes. As for Juliet, she's back at the other silo. She is frozen by this wannabe Katniss Everdeen, but it turns out these people were here the entire time. In fact, they had watched Juliet arrive. Now, it's just a bunch of kids, I mean, really teenagers, but you've got their leader, the wannabe Katniss, who's named Audrey. You've got her boyfriend, Rick, and then you've got the third person, the person that Juliet attacked, ripped the mask off. They call her Eater. And Audrey didn't trust Juliet from the start, mainly because she had teamed up with Solo. And Solo had killed their parents. So taking Solo was really personal for them. And with Juliet begging to let him go, they were not inclined to do that. Juliet explains that Solo has something she needs, and when she gets it, she can leave. No harm, no foul. And Rick says, "I'll tell you what, get us the food from his vault. If you get us that, then yeah, you can talk to him." And Juliet doesn't know the code, but Rick doesn't care. He says, "Figure it out." Eater even agrees to go with Juliet to help out. And Audrey, who thinks this is a bad plan, says, "Fine. You know what? My baby just ate, and she's going to cry again when she's hungry. And when she cries again, you better have gotten into that vault. And if you haven't, I'm going to put an arrow through his head. If you have small children, you know time is not on Juliet's side, so her and Eater head off to try to find out what this combination to the vault is. While Juliet looks for the code, Eater confides in her that she is hated by this group because her parents had asked them to take her in. But with an extra mouth to feed, they needed more food, and they were the ones who were trying to get into Solo's vault, which they must have been able to get into because Solo just would have stayed in there. But these people were clearly murdered. So the way that Juliet figures, they must have figured out the code, gotten in, and then, Solo did what he had to do. But after the parents were murdered, that's when Audrey and the group started calling her Eater because she was the reason why they had to go get food. She had to eat. And they've held it against her ever since. They won't even give her a name. After searching, they've been able to narrow it down as 6 numbers, but after punching in 2, it's incorrect, and they only have one more chance until they're locked out for 24 hours. So they have a 25% chance of getting this right, and they don't want to risk it. Juliet goes to Rick and says, I need to talk to him. And it's not just because Juliet wants to get the number out of him, she's also figured out who Solo is. This whole time, Solo had been saying that he was the IT shadow, but it didn't add up. Not just the picture, but his attitude, the timeline of things. What she was able to figure out was that his dad was the head of IT. And when all this went down, Solo was 12 years old. He was a kid. Solo's real name is Jimmy. So armed with this new information, she figures she can use it to get Solo to give her the code. As she's trying to do this and explaining to Solo who he actually is because she's been able to figure it out, the baby starts crying. Audrey runs in with the bow and arrow. But it's Rick who stops her and says, this is our best chance of getting food. Everybody's hungry. So just cool it. And Solo feels really apologetic about what happened, but he's also shook by it. He says that he had fallen asleep when they got in, and he left a gun right by the door, which they used to shoot him. In order to kind of defend himself, he trapped them in a room, and they couldn't breathe. They suffocated to death. In order to prove this story is correct, he shows them the bullet wound. Solo starts beating himself up, though, because he thinks he's a coward. When the events in this particular silo happened, his dad locked him in that vault and said, don't open it up for anything. The sheriff, though, grabbed Jimmy's dad. He put a gun to his head and said, open the door, and Jimmy refused. So the sheriff shot his dad right in front of a 12-year-old Jimmy, and he's been shook ever since. But because he didn't save his dad, he's always felt like a coward. And Juliet says, you're not a coward. He would be so proud of you. You did what he wanted you to do. Your dad wanted to save you, just like Audrey wants to save her baby right now. And when Solo finds out that this group has a baby, it changes everything. Now, they don't just have a baby, they have a couple kids with them that seem to be stragglers. But this information gets Solo to open the vault and invite them in. And the vault is beautiful. It's got books, it's got a ton of food, it's got music, and it has Juliet's fire suit. But actually, Juliet didn't need it. Because as she was searching for the information regarding the code, it led her to Jimmy's old place, the apartment that he grew up in, which had a suit, because the head of IT always had a suit. But even after finding this, Juliet still stuck to her word that she would try to get the code in order to save Solo's life. Solo does feel bad about it, not telling her about the suit, but he does ask, if you knew about the suit, why didn't you just take it and get out of here? And then he realizes it's because Juliet does consider him a friend, or at least she owes him. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry, it'll be up in a day or two.